Hello everyone, and today I will be taking a look at the biggest reversals in fan support we have seen on Drag Race. This can be changes from loved to hated or hated to loved, as long as the fanbase had a massive swing while a season was airing. First up, we have Season 15's Mistress Isabelle Brooks. Mistress's run on this season garnered insane reactions from the fans, as in the first 4 episodes of the season, she had her Instagram mass reported and banned 3 times. The fanbase's reaction to Mistress's light shade and Untucked was to get her Instagram account banned. This was an insane overreaction to what was very clearly some light shade, but it very much just went to show how much the fanbase hated Mistress. I understand if you want to watch RuPaul's Best Friends race. That's not what I want, but if that is what you want, I understand. But I truly do not know why the solution to that is to get Mistress's account banned. Needless to say, Mistress started out this season with a massive target on her back, with many fans hating her. This was some of the worst hate I had ever seen from some of the most mild and low-stakes drama I have ever seen. Interestingly, the catalyst for things starting to change was the Mistress versus Malaysia feud of the girl groups and acting challenges. During the girl group fight of Mistress and the Country Queens versus Malaysia and the Heavy Metal Queens, things really turned around for Mistress. I have no idea how this fight ended up being the catalyst in things changing, but I'm very glad it was. From this point until pretty much when the season ended, Mistress became a pretty big fan favorite. Even the fans who didn't really care for Mistress kinda just shut up about it. I have no idea what caused this. It could have been fans getting to spend more time with Mistress's playful side, it could be Mistress stepping things up in the challenges, going from good to great, or it could be getting to know more about her backstory and drag aesthetic. I don't know what it was, but people just started liking Mistress. I would say that a factor in this was probably Mistress not winning the ball. One of the best things that can happen for a queen is being robbed of a challenge win, and since Mistress did such a great job in the ball, a fair amount of people, myself included, believe she should have won. This really started boosting her fan support, and she ended as a moderately strong fan favorite. She was never going to win the fan vote over someone like Sasha or Anitra, but she went from having her social media accounts being banned multiple times in a week to placing 3rd in a fan vote, which is really good. First up, from All-Stars 3, we have Trixie Mattel. For the first half of All-Stars 3, things for Trixie were going okay. She was doing consistently okay in the challenges, just never great, which resulted in her kind of being the main character the first half of the season, as she had this built-in storyline of not being able to live up to her name outside the show. Things were going great for Trixie, and a lot of the fans were sympathizing with her and still enjoying her run and confessionals. People were still enjoying her even when she bombed Snatch Game with the terrible RuPaul impression that all the fans told her was good, and when she finally got her first challenge win in the ball. All of this to say, Trixie in the first half of the season was a massive fan favorite. This resulted in one of the most shocking things for me as a fan of the show who only started in late 2020. Trixie Mattel wins the All-Stars 3 fan vote in a complete landslide. This was very shocking for me, as for the first few months of my time as a fan, I had been constantly seeing people talk about how Shangela was robbed. This made my younger self think, oh, Shangela must have won the fan vote. But then, after learning a bit more about the lore of the show, I realized, oh, Trixie is still a massive fan favorite and won the fan vote. It was the jury twist that made people turn on Trixie as a competitor. Trixie on All-Stars 3 is a very interesting case, as she's very much still a fan favorite and the fans never stopped liking her. The issue was that due to her insane underdog edit, slight underperformance in the competition, and then the jury twist, no one really respected Trixie as a competitor. I was somewhat hesitant to include this on the list, but I felt it fit as the fanbase as a whole went from voting Trixie to be the winner of the season, to almost universally agreeing for years that Shangela was robbed. Next up, from season 16, we have Q. As far as first few episodes go, Q had some of the best we have ever seen on Drag Race. In episode 1, she was able to show off the campier and quirkier side of her drag, but also the fashion and artsy side, resulting in a top 2 placement. Then, in episode 3, we saw Q's sewing abilities in full swing. She is an incredibly talented seamstress, and this episode she was really able to show that off. Yet again though, she placed second, this time losing to Nymphia Wind. Things reached a boiling point in episode 4 where Q would once again place second in the RDR Live Acting Challenge, losing to Plasma. Having the story arc of always being the bridesmaid but never the bride is usually a great thing for queens. We saw what happened with Lady Camden, and it made things all the more satisfying when she finally got a win after placing high twice in a row. We arrive at episode 5, which is girl groups, and things do not go well for Q. While with Lady Camden we got to see someone shine after being second continuously, Q kinda flopped. It wasn't that Q did a horrible job or anything, but this was an incredibly strong cast in terms of performers, and Q kinda stuck out and not in a good way. Q would place in the bottom with a mandatory meeting and they would lip sync for their lives to Emergency. Amanda absolutely won this lip sync, and while I personally think Q put up a pretty good fight, Amanda did win the lip sync. Keeping Q over Amanda proved to be an incredibly controversial judging decision that Q's reputation in the fanbase never recovered from. Things got even worse for Q over the next stretch of episodes. In the show as a whole, she got a controversial high placement in the Rusical, and then a controversial win in the Design Challenge. Ultimately, I agree with both of these decisions, but I understand why a lot of people don't. The main issue for Q during this time is her behavior outside of the show. During this stretch of episodes where Q was really beginning to be viewed as favored by the fans, she would have some incredibly negative interactions on social media. This, as much as I hate to say it, kinda scared off a lot of her fans, and her reputation has yet to recover. In just a few episodes, Q went from a massive fan favorite to having some of the worst performances in the Reddit fan vote I have ever seen. Luckily, she seems to be getting a bit of a redemption arc on the show. We are finally learning about her personal life and her backstory, and I think that will probably result in a lot of people beginning to support her again. In the end, I would say this is still a 180. It could still reverse, and Q could end this out as a fan favorite, but I can't say that for sure. The first queen I will be talking about from All-Star 6 is Jan. Jan started out All-Star 6 on an incredibly high note. She was one of the biggest names going into the cast, and it was still very much the case within the fanbase that people thought she should have won Madonna the Rusical. Things got even better for Jan after the episode 1 talent show where Jan was kinda robbed. Jan not being in the top was absolutely insane, and it was 100% production trying to get her to crack. While they would accomplish that later on in the season, all they accomplished for this episode was getting the fans to rally behind Jan. At this point in the season, I would say she was the biggest fan favorite along with Raja. Jan's star continued to rise when she was inexplicably considered robbed in the ball. This is one I still don't understand. Even as a massive fan of Jan during this season, I still don't get why people thought she was robbed here. This one was a bit crazy, but it did still add to her momentum. All-Star 6 was the second season I watched live, and the general consensus that I got from the fanbase was Scarlett and Jan were pretty much partners in robbery. From what I saw after the premiere, everyone thought Jan should have won the talent show, while a sizable amount of people thought Scarlett should have won the ball or at least been high. This is where the journey between Jan and Scarlett would end, as Scarlett would continue being quote-unquote robbed, while Jan would go absolutely off the rails. In the episode 3 advertising challenge, Jan was placed in the bottom pretty fairly, and no one had too much of a reaction. She didn't get any votes to be eliminated, so this should have been a non-factor, but instead it jumpstarts Jan's delusional storyline. In a normal situation, winning the Rusical would have been a great storyline point for Jan, and most people would have been happy for her. Instead, the general consensus is that Jan had robbed Trinity of a deserved win, and people were not happy. It also makes things worse that around this point, production is starting to really push the delusional edit on Jan. All of that combined results in Jan losing a lot of the fan support she had for the first 2 to 3 episodes. Things would get even worse for Jan when she would immediately place in the bottom in episode 5 and Scarlet would be eliminated. While I don't think people held Scarlet's elimination against Jan per se, a lot of people felt that Jan was being absolutely delusional and crazy and that Scarlet should have gone further. While I am not one of those people, I understand where they were coming from, and to an extent I do understand why the fanbase turned on Jan so much. The final queen I will be talking about today from Season 16 is Plain Jane. Plain on Season 16 has had one of the most interesting story arcs we have ever seen. I have talked about it before, and I will likely be making a full video on it when the season is over, but still, wow. During this episode, there were constant comparisons to Jimbo, constant comparisons to Katya, and people were really not living for her attitude. The general consensus I saw from the fanbase is that Plain was a mean girl with a stolen drag aesthetic. Things would get continuously worse during the Plain vs. Amanda feud of episodes 3, 4, and 5. Side note, it does not feel like this storyline only lasted for 3 episodes. Going into this season, Plain was a queen with a very realized drag aesthetic and great makeup skills, while Amanda was still developing herself as a drag artist. Amanda's lack of polish within her drag, combined with Plain's complete willingness to play the villain, resulted in a very negative storyline. We have Amanda the underdog, and we have Plain the relentless bully. Sadly, we have not seen a conclusion for this storyline, but I hope we get something at the reunion. Throughout this period though, Plain got a lot of hate and a lot of comparisons to Jimbo, Katya, and other queens. This was just not a great time to be Plain. It wasn't as bad as what we've seen with some people, but it was still not good. Almost like a switch was flipped. As soon as Amanda is gone, Plain starts dominating the edit and the competition. She was always doing well, getting constant high placements and wins, but it wasn't until now that we start to learn more about Plain as a person. We get to hear about her backstory involving dolls, we get to hear more about her family, and I think getting to see a more human side of Plain really helped her with fans. While Plain still has a lot of haters, I think she has definitely turned a corner and has gone from the ultimate villain of the season to someone a lot of people respect and a fair amount of people root for. Since she's a villain and has all those haters, I don't think Plain can win this season, but I could absolutely see her making it to the end and being a close second or third place. Hey, it's Drag Race Rejudged. Do you want gay shit? Well then check out the RuPaul's Drag Race Rejudged YouTube channel and hit subscribe.